Hello again, and welcome to the St. Louis Blues Hockey Legends Podcast. Tom Calhoun here to shine a light on the stories of those instrumental in Blues history. Before we get into episode 10, I want to thank you real Blues fans for engaging with this project. I've been doing it since November and have enjoyed the work, and I've got some exciting news coming soon about the next level of the podcast and how you can become even more involved in the fun. The guest on this episode is Hockey Hall of Famer and Blues Hall of Famer, 91-year-old, but you'd never know it, Scotty Bowman. Joining us as a sponsor on the podcast this time around is the organization I work for in the summer months, the Gateway Grizzlies. They tell me they're planning a Tom Calhoun bobblehead night in the coming season. I'll tell you more about that after you enjoy some of my chat with the great Scotty Bowman. First, let's examine his amazing resume. Scotty holds the record for most wins in the National Hockey League history, with 1,244 wins in the regular season and 223 in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And his 14 Stanley Cup wins rank second most of all time for any player, coach, or executive. He coached the Blues, Canadiens, Sabres, Penguins, and Red Wings, and he was most recently the senior advisor of hockey ops for the Chicago Blackhawks until he stepped down in July of 22. Mr. Bowman is often regarded as the greatest coach in NHL history. As a head coach, he has won a record 9 Stanley Cup championships, 5 with the Canadiens, 1 with the Penguins, 3 with the Red Wings, and he's also won the Stanley Cup 5 times as a member of an organization's front office. Jack Adams Award winner in 76 and 96 as Coach of the Year. He won a record 60 games, breaking his own record of 58 wins the year before. So, I mean, the list goes on and on about accolades that Scotty has accumulated. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1991 and was a member of the original foundational class of the Blues Hall of Fame, inducted in 2023. So, without further ado, let's drop the puck with the great Scotty Bowman. Scotty, thanks so much for taking some time out of your schedule there, and you're living in Florida, right? And
yeah, I come here for about 8 months a year now, and I live up in Western New York, about 20 miles east of Buffalo, on the way to Rochester, New York.
and Sarasota in the winter.
Yeah, it's about 70 miles from Tampa. I haven't gone to the games as much this year. A lot of visitors, and but I probably start. I did go for since I came down. I came down here in 2005, so I've seen the Lightning play, for nearly 20 years now.
Yeah, Red Berenson, who was on the last podcast, told me that you make it to the Lightning games fairly frequently.
Yeah, I like to go back, and the traffic is getting pretty heavy. It's not the distance as much as it's the time. I used to leave and get up there in an hour and 5 minutes. Now it's a 2 hour, but it's not a long drive, but you're in traffic,
Right.
like everywhere.
Um, so you pulled away from your advisory role with the Blackhawks a few years ago. Do you miss it?
I left in 20, yeah, my son left in 21 and I left in 22. But
Hmm.
I wanted to do a lot of other. It was a new regime, and I wasn't interested in staying on. I didn't. I was there long enough, and I wanted to do other things and be a little bit more on my own schedule. So
Sure.
it's been what, 3 years now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure with Stan being there in Edmonton, you keep up with all of the goings on in the league in one way or another, though, right?
I watch a lot of hockey. I don't watch a lot of the West Coast, but I watch. Yeah, I move around. Yeah, I've got a lot of plans. I've got ESPN Plus, and I've got the local team here, and I've got the NHL Network. They're putting a lot more games on the network now. So,
Mm.
but our cable company provides. We pay a little fee, but not much a month. So we get NHL Network, and we get the Big Ten Network, which I kind of watch. I like to watch some college games. Friends of mine that have some boys playing in the college ranks. So I keep busy, and I have a lot of grandchildren playing. Got let's see, I've got I got three girls playing hockey,
Ah,
two in Chicago, I know actually three in Chicago, two in the suburbs, one in the city, and grandboys, grandchildren. I've got, I think, two, three, five of them play. So we got I guess what's called live barn. I don't know if you know much about it. It's a company that has cameras in. I don't know any rinks that in both Canada and the USA that don't have it. So you get a subscription and you can watch them play live or you can record them. So we're
yeah,
pretty busy. I got a pretty busy schedule trying to keep up with them.
sounds like it. Sounds like you are keeping yourself active. Well, I like to go back to the beginnings of your experience with hockey on this podcast, make it kind of you know, your hockey life experience, if we can do that a little bit.
Sure.
It's about your family background and growing up in Montreal area and when you first got exposed to the sport.
Well, I was quite young. Like I grew up about maybe 10 miles from the original rink arena that the Canadians played, the Montreal Forum. I lived in a suburb, but it was an easy trip up. There's bus service. I didn't go to a lot of games when I was young, but I played youth hockey in my own home city, Verdun. And then I got involved with the Canadian organization. They sponsored a midget team which was under 16, 14 to 16, and then I moved up into junior. So that was my connection. But we had outdoor ice in Canada at that time. I mean, I don't even know if they have as much outdoor ice even in my area because they built a lot of indoor rinks as they had did in most NHL cities. But we played outside, and we played. All the time. We used to go, especially on a Saturday and Sunday. But I lived pretty close to a park that had two outdoor rinks. So I would started when I was maybe I think the first time I started skating, I was about 6 or 7, but we didn't get on teams at a young age in my era. I was 9 years old when I got on my first team, and we played in a league that was under 12. So, I mean, I was pretty young, and not just me, other boys that wanted to sign up. There was a lot of teams, but we didn't play a lot of games, but we went on the weekends and played. They call it shinny, as you know what that is. You just went on the ice. There was no games during the weekend. They played a few games during the week, but on the weekends they had ice hockey games, but not run by anybody, just pickup games. So
James.
that's how I got my start, and I would put the skates on in my house and skate up. We had pretty cold weather. We didn't have any street sanding or anything like that or salting. The ice would form on the street and we just skate off, not even 5 minutes from the park. And we'd stay. I do remember because we used to go maybe 8 or 9 in the morning and we'd stay till after dark. So that was a full day on the outdoor ice. When it got too cold, there was a warming shack. I remember all those things, and then
Sure.
I got into organized hockey when I was like 12 years old. I was on regular teams.
And anybody in your family encourage you to play the sport, or was it just something you picked up with the neighborhood guys?
No, my parents came over from. I was born in 33. Both my parents came over from Scotland, and my dad came over in 1929, and my mom came over in 1930. They got married in Canada, and that would be. They were soccer. They didn't have much. I mean, there was no hockey in Scotland when they were growing up, but they adapted to. I had a younger brother that also played sports. I had two brothers, but one of them played sports a lot, and he's a good football and good hockey player. And he never played above junior, but he did play major juniors. So we had a pretty family full of sports. But my dad, he was a soccer player, so but he got involved watching NHL when he was like when he first got into Montreal. They had two teams when when he got into Montreal in 1930, and I think a couple of years later, they had the Montreal Canadiens and they had another team, the Montreal Maroons, and the
That was
Canadians were more on the French side with the French players, and the Maroons. They actually won a Stanley Cup in 1935. I remember that, but they couldn't support two teams at that time. Probably could now, but the one team lasted till 1938, and then they disbanded.
well, we have that Scottish heritage in common as well. My grandfather came over to play soccer from Scotland. That was in the early 1900s, actually. So we have that in common as well. So you mentioned you played junior hockey for you played for the Montreal Junior Canadiens,
Yeah.
and you were a pretty good player, right? And then you had that incident with John Guy Talbot. I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but that that kind of
Yeah, it was.
that kind
That's
of
a
changed
long
the
time
whole
ago. In
direction of your
fact,
career, right?
yeah, we became pretty close after I drafted. Well, we didn't draft him. We got him on waivers from. He went to Minnesota in the expansion draft, and then I don't know what happened with Minnesota, but around maybe December or January, they were, I don't know what they were doing, but they put him on waivers, and we, St. Louis Blues, we picked him up, and Jean-Guy stayed there. I think he coached a little bit, and we kept the connection with each other even as my career went on, from even after St. Louis, and he went a different way, and I went a different way, and Jean-Guy was a good friend after that. It was just an unfortunate accident, but he always called me on my birthday in September. I won't get a call again though, because as you know, Jean-Guy just passed away. He
Last year.
was 2 years older than me.
Yeah.
He was born in 1931 and played junior against me. I was born 2 years later in 1933, but he was a wonderful man. He was always humorous and very I guess you could say one of the most friendliest people you could ever meet, and everybody liked him, and we got along very well. And he was a very valuable addition to our team. He paired up with Jimmy Roberts. They were like sort of like hybrid players. They played defense together, and then later on, when we needed help up front, we could, in the late stages of games in the third period, we used to make a fourth line, and we only dressed. Well, when I was in St. Louis, we dressed 16 players. We didn't dress 18 like now.
Hmm.
So I think we kind of dressed. Jean-Guy and Jimmy Roberts, they played defense for usually a couple of periods, and then we would make a fourth line and we would put them up front because they were that type of players. They were hybrid. They were very good defensively up front, and they had a good offensive touch playing defense. So we had a good system with those two.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the incident that Scotty referred to was a slashing incident where Jean-Guy injured Scotty pretty badly, and that put you on the path to being a coach, right?
I was young, and we didn't have helmets like they have today. I don't think anybody had a helmet. They didn't have any helmets. They had some leather helmets, but they were not protective at all. So if you got a pretty serious head injury, it was pretty hard to come back. I played a little bit after, but I got into. I mean, I was still going to high school when it happened, in my last year of high school, and then I went into took a business course and took a job with a paint company, and I still then I stayed in hockey. That started me coaching. The Montreal Canadiens had the youth teams were in my hometown, so I started coaching. I think they were under 15 or 16, and I don't
Hmm.
know what happened there. Something happened there. Oh, it's a call coming in. I shouldn't have. That's the problem, but it's gone. Yeah,
Well,
but
that's okay. We'll we'll let it go. You'll have to call him back.
I don't care. No, I get some probably we get a lot of those calls you don't want to get. I don't know if you get them too, but
Oh yeah, sure. Everybody gets those.
yeah.
Uh, Talk about how you got from coaching at the lower levels in the Canadians organization to winding up coaching being the head coach for the Blues after Lynn Patrick gave up the coaching job with the Blues.
Well, Lynn's son, Craig Patrick, who became manager of Pittsburgh, another story that I joined after I left Buffalo.
Mhm.
Craig Patrick came to Montreal from Boston. Very few U.S. He was one of the first U.S. players, a young player. He was about 16 years old. He came up from, he went to school in Montreal. He was still in high school when he came up. He came up with another young boy from Boston, Larry Plow, who also had a connection with the Blues later on.
Yeah, he
And
was
I think he was assistant. Was he assistant to somebody? Maybe Ron
GM
Caron.
for a while here in the early 2000s. Larry
Well,
was. Yeah.
Larry and Craig came to Montreal when they were both 15 or 16, played junior B, and then moved up, played junior Canadians. And Lynn Patrick was the manager, general manager of the Boston Bruins, which would this would be about 1960. I'm going to say since I'm trying to figure the year, I was scouting till 61 to 64, around 1964. And so Len used to come up and watch our team play around maybe 63 even.
Hmm.
And so I got to know him, and he saw me coaching. And then he went to the Western League from Boston with the Los Angeles Blades in the Western Pro League. And then when the Blues got the expansion franchise, he knew me, and we had met a few times, not very much. He'd come up for a quick weekend visit and see his son, and then we would talk a little bit after. So he interviewed me, and I still had a 1 year remaining on a 2 year or 2 or 3 year contract with the Canadians, but he knew the Montreal management too. So he said, I'll handle everything, which he did. And that's when I went to the Blues in 19, well, the season started in 67, but
Right.
I went in 1966. I was hired when they got the franchise. I was hired a month later, and I uh, I went to St. Louis a year before the season, the opening season.
Right. Well, and of course, then Lynn steps down, you become the coach, and the Blues go to the Stanley Cup Finals the first 3 years of their existence because all those expansion teams were put in the division together, and it was guaranteed that one team would wind up in the Stanley Cup Finals. Looking back on it, do you think that was a good move by the NHL to set it up that way so those new teams that were introduced would have that sort of exposure?
Well, Tom, the real crowning touch to the expansion was that Western League that I talked to a little bit about just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
The Western Hockey League was a very strong, independent. They weren't connected with the National Hockey League, although a lot of players were sent from NHL teams, but they um, they had a very strong leader, and that was his name, Al Leader, and
Hmm.
he had a very big hockey and a legal background, and he wanted to get the Western Hockey League. I would say around 64, he approached the NHL to become the Western Division of the NHL because they already had some big cities. They had Los Angeles, they had San Francisco, they had some good cities in Canada, So Portland, they had Seattle, I think they had Spokane. They had enough Western cities, and the NHL at the time was really starting to thrive in the six-team league, especially the Blackhawks in Chicago. They had suffered through the 50s, and the late Jim Norris, who owned the Hawks, they had a pretty solid team developing with Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita coming out of junior in the late 50s. So he didn't want to have an expansion. They didn't want to expand to they didn't want to share their six-team league. But then about a year or two later, the president, Clarence Campbell, they were very fearful and they were threats that this Western League said, okay, we can't get in the NHL. We're gonna start our own major league. And that was the precursor of the NHL. The NHL wisely said, "Hey, we better expand." And it was Clarence Campbell, the president's idea. We'll expand, but we'll keep the six teams. It's a big expansion when you go 6 to 12, but we'll keep them in their own division, and we'll play a home and home with them to give them some real, marquee names. And I think that's what we did the first year. I think we had only one home game and one away game against the original six, but that was his plan, and that's how the NHL expanded. And of course, all the expansion since that time. I mean, they only stayed with the 16 expansion till 3 years, and then 4 years, I guess, and then all of a sudden Buffalo and Vancouver got admitted. But
Right.
it was quite a pressure game that the Western Hockey League was going to put on the NHL. But isn't it odd enough that 5 years after the NHL did expand, the rival league did start in
Yeah.
1972. The
Yeah.
the
Jay.
WHA started. So, but by that time, the NHL was already involved with they had, by then they were up to 14 teams. So that league lasted from 72 to 79,
Hmm.
and it had a lot of issues. They were throwing money around. It didn't last. Four of the teams were fairly successful, and that's when the NHL merged and they took in Quebec City, and they took in Hartford, and they took in I think there was two other ones that they took. Winnipeg,
Heck,
yeah,
yeah.
and that's how they got the four strongest franchises. They took them into the NHL, and the other ones just folded.
Right. I want to take a brief time out here to tell you about the Gateway Grizzlies. They are always providing family fun at their baseball park in Sauget. It's Grizzlies Ballpark, and it means fun for the entire family. It's family oriented, and that means the pricing is family oriented too. And they tell me they're going to do a Tom Calhoun bobblehead coming up on May the 16th. That's opening night of the upcoming Frontier League season. So I hope you'll make plans to be there and get yourself a Calhoun bobblehead. That's going to be quite the item for everybody's man cave, right? Go to GatewayGrizzlies.com and find out about the upcoming season schedule and all the wonderful promotional nights they have, including the greatest night in baseball. You don't want to miss that on Labor Day weekend. GatewayGrizzlies.com. Right. So after the 70-71 season, Scotty, you leave the Blues. It was no secret you had a little dispute with ownership back then. Do you care to shed some light on exactly what was going on there? What many of us Blues fans were kind of heartbroken that you left the team because you had it in such good shape, and the first 3 years to the Stanley Cup Finals and all that. Al Arbor was there, and all kinds of great names were on the roster in those days. But we're kind of curious about what that dispute was that took you back to Montreal.
Well, it kind of started. Probably the main reason was that our staff, myself and Cliff Fletcher was my assistant, who later went on to be the manager in Atlanta and Calgary, and he and I were very close, and we never wanted to really. The crux of it was we didn't feel comfortable trading Red Berenson. That was the start of it. That was the start of maybe the fact that we didn't want to trade him, and the management ownership and everything. They just felt that we weren't. We had the 3 losses and 12 losses, and they wanted to retool the team, and it wasn't easy at that time, and that was the start of it. And I had a disagreement after we did trade Red, and then I didn't want to do it, and I knew that we were going to get a good young player in Gary Younger, but at the same time, it was going to hurt our playoff chances that year, and we got beat by Minnesota in 6 games the fourth year, and we were a good team in the fourth year. The only reason we didn't finish first in our division was Chicago swung over from the East Division because of Buffalo and Vancouver coming
Mm.
in, and Vancouver, they needed to balance our league out, so they put Chicago offered to come into our league, and they were stronger than us still, even after the 3 years we were all playing. So consequently, at the end of the year, they still wanted to make a lot of changes, and I didn't feel very comfortable with the changes. And then an opportunity came that I mean didn't come right away. It came after I decided that that wasn't the way I wanted to stay there. It was a very difficult decision, but that's the way I made it, and I said I have to live by it. But I got a chance to go back to my hometown in Montreal, and they had just won the cup the year before, but they had an issue, and they were looking. And I knew the people that were running the team because I had coached junior teams with the people that were now the manager there. So that's the real, say, just the tip of the iceberg why I wanted to leave. And so we agreed to. I had an existing contract, but we agreed after a few negotiations that I could get out of the contract, and I could go on to what I was going to go back to my hometown.
I'm sure you don't regret that move, but what do you think how things might have gone in St. Louis had you decided to stay? I mean, that's obviously speculation, but I mean, you went on to a wonderful career in several other places, but being selfish, I would have liked to seen you stick around in St. Louis.
Well, it was a hard decision to make. I just had a young girl born the year before. My wife was from that area, but sometimes you have to make some decisions based on you have to have the right attitude and have to have the right interest. And I lost my interest that I felt that this was going to be a tough sledding to have to and, they I was there's some other events that they wanted to make changes with, and I didn't we just didn't agree on the changes, and I didn't when you don't agree on changes you can't stay and be uncomfortable, and that was the biggest decision I had to make.
Well, you made it, and things turned out pretty darn well in other places as we went through your resume at the beginning of the podcast. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, hockey coach of all time. What qualities do you credit for having made you such a successful coach, Scotty? What was it? Communication? What is it? Was it a combination of things? What?
I,
What?
I think I was very fortunate that when I went to St. Louis, I was very young. When I first started, I was 32, and then when I coached, I turned 33, I think. But we had some terrific veteran Hall of Fame. They were Hall of Fame players, not only because they went to the finals with the Blues, but Glenn Hall, Jacques Plante, Doug Harvey, Dickie Moore wasn't there as long as some of the others, but having the know-how and being able to be with those type of players, some of them for 3 years, some of them for four, and uh, I owe a lot to the fact that my coach in junior hockey was Sam Pollock. He stayed with Montreal till he got into business later on. He was a wonderful manager, and then Lynn Patrick is the one that brought me to St. Louis. So between those two people is probably what framed my chance to get an opportunity to coach in the NHL, which may not have happened if the league hadn't expanded. I realize all that, but I had the real good fortune and also when I went to Montreal before I could get through all this, Toe Blake was the coach before me, and he was a wonderful, uh, I guess, information gatherer that I could get after I started with Montreal. But I would say in St. Louis, we had the good fortune the what changed the whole complexion of our team was, first of all, we had a quiet draft, but being able to get Glenn Hall as our goalie on the third goalie pick, because they had two drafts. They had the player draft and they had the goalie draft. And then, we drew the straw on the player draft. We drew number six straw out of six, but we got a good player in Jimmy Roberts because he was a forward and a defenseman. And then by drafting six out of six, we missed the first five. We couldn't draft lower than third in the goalie draft, and we were fortunate because the goalie draft, there was a good young goalie, and was a great young goalie, and developed into a winner too. Bernie Perrant got drafted by Philadelphia. He was the class of the goalies because of his age.
Hmm.
Terry Sawchuk went to Los Angeles, and that left us been able to draft Glenn Hall, and that was the big. That was he. If you look what Glenn played and did, and then got a little help from Jacques Plante the next couple of years. But the fact is, the team was changed around by the fact that we had a player on our team, Ron Stewart. He came from Toronto, Stanley Cup team. He was a veteran, about 35, 36 years old, and he was leading our team in scoring. He was a good two-way player, but with our team, with the experience from the NHL, he was a regular, more than a regular. He was on a Stanley Cup team, and he could play. He was a great player. I mean, at that time, but he was getting on. He wasn't very happy with being in the expansion. He really was. He was playing well, but he wanted to really leave, and he wanted to get out of there. And the Rangers were looking for that type of player. That trade made the whole organization to get. Imagine getting Barclay Plager and Red Berenson
Yeah.
for that trade. I mean, they were Rangers. We could see their point of view, and Lynn and I were in on the trade because I knew both. Barkley had played junior for me in Peterborough, and he was hanging around the American Hockey League, belonging to the Rangers, and they had a bevy of defensemen, and I guess they weren't going to use them. And Red Berenson they just picked him up from Montreal, but he had broken his ankle the year before, and he
Yeah.
missed the whole season, and it was hard getting back into the swing because the Rangers were a really good team, especially at center ice. That was their strong suit. I mean, they had really good centermen. So getting those two players, to me, I look back at the team. We had a lot of other good players that meant a lot to our team, but they turned us around. I mean, I can tell you the goaltending of Glenn Hall, and we got a team. We had a team that could defend. After we got straightened out around November and December, we had a team that was really committed because when the expansion draft was on, there's only six teams in the NHL, and there was a lot of most of the players in the NHL were two-way players. They would be 20 goal scorers. They could play defense, they could play a good defensive game. There was a lot of good players that couldn't score as quick. They couldn't get 20 goals. They got 10, but the competition was so tough that they had to play in the minors. So we got some really good defensive players. The first year, fellas like Billy McCreary and Jerry Melnick. These were experienced players that played in the NHL, but not a lot because they weren't goal scorers. But so we had a team that could really shut down the opposition. That was the main. I think if you looked at our team, I mean, the goaltending was the best in the league. Our defense core was big, strong. We had Bob Plager, we had Al Arbor, we had Bob Plager, we had we had Barkley, we had Jimmy Roberts, and I mentioned John Guy Talbot, and we had as good a defense as most of the teams in the East Division,
Hmm.
just because we had big, strong guys, and some were good offensively. And Al Arbor was such a good defense. He and Bob Plager were just like extra goalies around. They could block shots. They didn't play much offense, but we didn't need that, and that's the kind of team we had.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking us down memory lane like that. That's great. I'm wonderful. I'm glad you have such a wonderful memory about that stuff. Um, Let me switch gears
I
for
got to
just
tell you, you asked me about a couple of different things that people might enjoy.
yeah,
The very first year that we had it, I got there in '66,
right,
and and Lynn Patrick was the manager, and he knew this trainer Tommy Woodcock that was at Brown University,
sure,
and Tommy came into St. Louis that summer. I remember going through all the rubbish over the arena when they were. I was many times that August and September of '66. I said to myself, "How did I ever end up with this kind of a building?" But you know how they were just it's like when you get a house and you try to reconstruct it, but they
yeah,
did.
yeah,
And Tommy and I became very close that first year, the first summer, and I was single, but he was married, and we had to go. Tommy had a big task of buying all the equipment and buying all the supplies, and it was really funny. He would take me along with him, and we would go into places, and at the same time they didn't know anything about hockey. These people. I remember one place we went into, and we were buying tape. Tommy was ordering the tape for the whole season, and it was in boxes, not rolls, but boxes. And he knew the price of what college teams paid. If it was like 25 cents a roll, we
you
knew
tape
that
for
we
sticks or tape for the ankles or well,
sticks and the equipment. Like I
oh,
mean,
yeah,
to keep the pads on, the shin pads and everything
yeah,
else. That's what they had.
yeah,
So we went to a couple of places, and the price seemed to be a bit high for Tommy. I didn't know anything about them. I just went with him. And one fellow said, "Well, what was?" Tom said, "No, I think the guy was asking 32 cents a roll." Tommy said, "No, it's not 32. It should be 26 or 27." And the man got upset and said, "Well, what's we're buying all this tape? Who's it for?" And Tommy said, "Well, it's for the new team coming in next year, St. Louis Blues."
yeah,
And the guy said to us, I was right with him. Well, he said, "What are you guys worried about the price?" He said, "The owner of that team's got a lot of money. I know. I read about him." That wasn't true. The Solomons had a good business, but they were not multimillionaires like
oh,
teams are today.
right,
And then the other story I got to tell you, but you might have heard of. I'm sure you might have heard about it, but it's really strange. After our banner year, the first season, everybody was interviewing people with the Blues, and a big hockey magazine interviewed Mr. Solomon, Sid Solomon Jr., and wanted to go over the season. Why was this team so successful? And he was talking about everything, and he brought up the name of our organist, Norm Kramer.
yeah.
Did you know this story or not?
Oh no, go ahead.
So Norm Kramer was our organist, and he meant so much to the fans because that was in the era of Liberace, and Norm used to wear these fancy suits and clothes, sitting up. They made a little loft that everybody could see him,
Sure,
and of course he got the fans singing. He got the fan. I mean, we were the first team that really that I could ever recall that the fans would be able to sing the St. Louis Blues March.
please come marching in. Yeah,
That's right. So, anyways, Mr. Solomon did this story in the summer, and he said, we got everything going here. So we got an organist. He's worth a goal a game to this team. The way he gets everybody up on their feet, and we got the best crowd, and because of him, and oddly enough, organists didn't get paid much in that era. I think he would be paid about maybe $100 a game,
maybe.
and
Yeah,
anyways, when Mr. Solomon, we used to look after all those arrangements. The next year after the first successful season, he tried to well, he negotiated to give him a bit of a raise,
yeah.
and I mean, it was unbelievable. But Norm asked for like $10,000, instead of maybe making $100 a game for 30, maybe 3,500, and he wanted to triple his salary. And Mr. Solomon said, "Oh, come on, you know." And then so the Norm brought out the magazine,
Yeah.
and he said, "Mr. Solomon, I'm worth a goal a game to this team. You don't have any players that even get half a goal a game, and you're paying them 10 and 15 and $20,000. So the story, what happened was, Mr. Solomon told him to take a hike for sure.
Yeah.
So we started that season. We didn't have an organist, but we brought people in from different areas. There was a great organist that we liked from the baseball team, Hayes.
Ernie
Uh,
Hayes. Yeah.
what was his first name?
Ernie
Ernie
Hayes.
Hayes. He was the most popular. Well, he didn't want to work in the winter for
Yeah.
us. I mean, so you know that if you look at our record in the first couple of months, the second year, we come out of the gate not as good as we wanted to. And maybe I'm going to say by late November, early December, we had to we had to re-up with Norm Kramer and bring him back. And Mr. Solomon knew he didn't get his 10,000, but he came back, and back we got on the roll again. But I thought you'd like those two stories.
Yeah, those are great. And Ernie Hayes, by the way, did come along later on to become the regular organist, and might have
Isn't
been
that?
after you left. Yeah,
Yeah, he was a great organist for the Cardinals.
right. We've got a great organist right now, Jeremy Boyer, and Jeremy has started wearing spangly jackets just like Norm did
Oh,
back in the
oh,
early
wow.
days.
Yeah, everybody loved him. He was a great organist, but a good showman, and
Mm,
he had timing. He got the fans singing, which
yeah,
didn't happen in any city, the original six. And the blues couldn't. And Mr. Solomon had a lot of connections. We had big ceremonies at the time. I remember we would bring politicians. We would bring Arthur Godfrey. He would bring entertainers. He had a lot of connections because of his political
yeah,
connections, and so it was quite a scene to be with the Blues. He was a very close friend of a great senator, Stuart Symington,
right.
and he used to come into the room on Saturday nights after a pretty good game, and Mr. Solomon would be so proud. He'd bring him in the room, and he would roll around and meet all the players, and
Mhm.
so it was a. And of course, the other thing about the Blues that they did, and they didn't have it in any other arenas, the Arena Club. The
Yeah,
Arena Club was the first. I think it was the first food establishment that I think that any team in the NHL ever started. And look at it now. They have private clubs and everything, but the Arena Club was really the icing on the cake for the season ticket holders who could afford to join it. And they loved it. They just loved to meet their friends. And so the atmosphere of going to a Blues game, especially on a weekend, was never, I mean, you never heard of before.
yeah. I had a few steaks with Dan Kelly in the Arena Club back in the day after some games. And of course, Dan was famous for his post-game meals. Um, let's head down the home stretch here, Scotty. Thanks for spending so much time with us, by the way, and telling some great stories. I asked this of all of our legends on the podcast, and I'll ask you as well. How would you like Scotty Bowman to be remembered? What's your legacy?
Well, with the Blues, I mean, obviously, I mean, you mean like all my career or just the
Yeah.
Blues?
When people mention the name Scotty Bowman, what do you hope they remember about you?
Well, I guess the first thing that come to mind is I lasted a long time, especially in the coaching ranks. And I uh, I had I think what it showed to me looking back, I really had a passion for being in hockey, but I had a passion for coaching. I had tried some other jobs in the business, but I did them. but not like coaching. Is nothing better than coaching a group of people and trying to get them to work together. And I keep telling any young people that if you get a job, I don't think I ever felt it was a job because I had so much passion. I started young, and I ended up late. And what I'd like to be remembered is that I just enjoyed my work because I had the passion to do it, and I never regarded it as a real late laborious job. It was just something that I started young and enjoyed. So that would be how I would be looked at like to be remembered, that I enjoyed my work and I had a passion for it.
And I'm sure a lot of people would add to that that you were the best there ever was. Well, Scotty, thanks so much again for spending some time with us here on the Legends podcast. I know our regular listeners and watchers will be thrilled to hear some of the stories you've told. And um, any parting shot that you'd like to give us for the Blues fans who are listening today?
Well, it's odd that I'm doing the game today, and I have a lot of people I still talk to, but one person that I started to develop a friendship after I came down here, and we never were on the same team. He's an announcer, and he's going to broadcast a St. Louis Blues radio game tomorrow night, Thursday night. He was with Hartford and Raleigh, the Carolina Hurricanes, Chuck Caton.
I'll be darned.
So he'll be doing a one-shot game. I guess your radio broadcaster is, I don't
Chris
know.
Berber.
Yeah, he's got something that he can't miss.
Yeah, well, I
And
think his father recently passed away, and I think he might have to deal with that.
that's right. And he must have recommended Chuck. And I hope that the fans enjoy him. I enjoy talking to him about twice a day. So
Well,
he's
awesome.
come full circle to go back to the Blues. And I just told him, don't mess it up. You better get them 2 points.
Well, thank you, Hockey Hall of Famer Scotty Bowman and Blues Hall of Famer Scotty Bowman. What a treat. I appreciate it so much, and all the best to you, sir.
Okay, Tom. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to episode 10 with Scotty Bowman. But we have bonus material with Scotty. Stay tuned to our social media to find out how to access this bonus mini episode. Visit paguytom.com or blueshockeylegends.com for the latest info. Video of the podcast available on the Monday after release of the audio. Visit youtube.com and search for St. Louis Blues Hockey Legends, and please subscribe while you're there. Tom Calhoun here saying thanks for listening, and let's go Blues!